Yesterday, we had a blockbuster show. We had a major national scoop. The dictatorship of Saudi Arabia has hired one of the world's largest law firms to send threatening letters to Canadian TV stations warning them not to run an ad calling attention to the abuse of women in Saudi Arabia. You can see that ad in the background now. Even worse, Canadian TV stations are actually obeying that Saudi fatwa. CTV, Canada's largest private broadcaster, and at least one other TV station have told the Saudis they're going to obey them. To hell with their contracts. The only way I found out about this is that I'm a volunteer with the human rights NGO that produced the ads, and I was shocked to receive a tip from a broadcaster who had been threatened. The ad is totally factual, of course. It talks about how Saudis treat women. The ad was even footnoted, for crying out loud. But the Saudis hired the biggest, baddest law firm they could, called Norton Rose, with 2,600 lawyers to threaten TV stations not to run it. EthicalOil.org, the NGO that produced the ad, actually had a written contract with CTV to air the ad this week. But then CTV sent this email saying they've been threatened. Given the fact that we, BCE, are in receipt of notice as to legal dispute between the parties, prudent thing to do is to hold off on airing. Our position should be that we are in receipt of notice of a legal dispute with respect to this spot, and that accordingly we will not broadcast the spot until the legal dispute is resolved, unquote. But of course there is no litigation, there's no lawsuit. Even Norton Rose isn't creative enough to come up with a legitimate legal complaint about the ad. They haven't sued anyone, they've just done a lot of threatening that they will or they might. That's enough to scare off TV stations who don't want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars defending a nuisance suit against a foreign dictator. I invited Rahul Agarwal on the show again today. He's the Saudis lawyer who made the threats. Just like yesterday, he didn't accept my invitation. Neither did the Saudi ambassador. I mean, bullies are usually cowardly. We know Saudi Arabia is an awful place. We know they're bullies. We know they support and finance terrorism around the world. I mean, really, who would expect any better from the Saudis? Certainly not me. I guess we've been lucky that they've only been making legal threats. When the Saudis are mad, sometimes far worse things can happen. But it's been 24 hours since we blew the lid off the story yesterday, and as Ali Velshi, the community organizer behind Ethical Oil, told us on the show yesterday, he sent a letter of concern to the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament. And nothing. Not a word from John Baird, the Foreign Minister. Now, Dean Allison, the Conservative chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, wrote back to Ali saying, and I'll read it in full, "Dear Mr. Velshi, thank you for your email and for your bringing your concerns to my attention. I will bring your correspondence to the attention of ministers responsible and the committee members once we reconvened, and they, as a committee, will make the decision, blah, 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 blah. Sincerely, Dean Allison, blah, blah, blah." I mean, seriously, that's called a PFO letter in the business. Thanks for your note. We'll look at it later and maybe get back to you if we have something to say. Sorry, gotta go. Even worse was a response from Joe Oliver's press flack, Julie DiMambro. Joe Oliver is the Natural Resources Minister, and here's what Julie DiMambro said. "Our government is committed to the environmentally friendly and socially responsible development of our oil sands resources." Seriously, like the Saudis are threatening TV stations with lawsuits. TV stations are capitulating. And the minister in charge of the oil sands doesn't have anything to say, certainly not by himself. He sends out a junior staffer who talks about how green the oil sands are. That is not the point. I like the oil sands. Some Canadians don't. That is not the point. The point is that the Saudi dictators are bullying TV stations into silence and blackballing a human rights ad about Saudi women, stopping it from being aired. What the hell does that have to do with what some junior staffer named Julie DiMambro said? Cuckoo. But if you think the government of Canada was lame, they are positively champions when compared to the mainstream media itself. I mean, where were our friends at PEN Canada, the free speech group? They've come on our show before to talk about censorship of the radio song Money for Nothing by Dire Straits. I was sure they'd come on today to talk about a foreign dictatorship bringing Sharia censorship to Canada. Nope, they simply refused to talk about it. Too tough, I guess. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association, same thing, silence. Smash up a store in a G20 protest and they'll talk about your rights till the cows come home. Saudi Arabia censoring CTV, and the civil liberties left-wingers say, boring. How about journalistic groups, like groups of reporters, like the Parliamentary Press Gallery, or a group called Canadian Journalists for Freedom of Expression? Nothing. Not a word. When Stephen Harper limits them to 3 questions in a scrum, they write 100 self-serving stories about censorship. When the government doesn't give some arts grant to some punk musician, the media writes about censorship. That's not censorship. But when censorship actually happens, when Saudi Arabia threatens broadcasters in Canada with massive nuisance suits for airing a human rights ad, nothing, nothing, nothing. Amnesty International, how about them? Nothing. They're too busy condemning Israel to give a damn about Saudi Arabia. We invited Amnesty on the show today. Nothing. The Canadian Bar Association, they put out more than 200 press releases for Omar Khadr, a convicted terrorist, claiming that his charter rights were breached. He's a convicted terrorist, but not a word about a terrorist-sponsoring country like Saudi Arabia, when our charter rights truly are being flattened. Not a word. Well, how about our rival media? How about CTV? That's a joke. I mean, do you think that CTV would do a news story about how CTV caved in on censorship? Okay, fine. How about CBC, the state broadcaster? Of course not. Look, they're anti-oil sands to begin with and pro-Saudi Arabia, so they really couldn't be bothered. Well, how about all of the media critics out there who have crapped on the Sun News Network over the past 6 months, who have derided us as not serious enough, not thoughtful enough, not journalistic enough? Well, they're all hiding under their desks. This is the test of journalistic freedom, of journalistic integrity, of journalistic ideals. A foreign dictatorship has hired a law firm to threaten Canadian TV stations into blacklisting a human rights ad. TV stations are complying with this fatwa out of fear, and the press gallery is scared or ignorant, or you know what? They probably support the ban in some cases. All of our journalistic superiors, all of the journalism school professors, all of the experts, they are all goddamn cowards. Just like they were during the Danish cartoon riots. They were all too scared to show some banal cartoons of the Muslim prophet Muhammad. Scared of riots, but mainly scared of being called politically incorrect. Scared of the hassle. We are not saints at The Sun for simply reporting this. That's our job. The Sun isn't amazing and awesome because they're the only TV station in Canada to air those ethical oil ads. That's what TV stations actually do for a living. They sell ads and take money. That's the job. But what about the Prime Minister? Where the hell is he? Today, his office put out some talking points to Tory supporters. Here's what it said. Quote, "We are proud that the press and third-party organizations are free to speak their minds in reporting and advertising in our country," unquote. But that's not true, is it? That's not true. That's actually the problem here. TV stations are not free to speak their minds. Advertisers are not free to speak their minds because Saudi Arabia is paying a 2,600-man law firm to make threats, and CTV and other broadcasters are obeying those threats. That is the problem. We are not free here, actually. Even the NDP, no fans of the oil sands, they get it. Here's what Paul Dewar, the NDP's foreign affairs critic, had to say yesterday. He said, quote, "I think the Saudis should probably stick to regulating their own affairs. It's not for them to decide what's on our airwaves." Exactly. And he's the foreign affairs critic. The foreign affairs minister, and his sexy parliamentary secretary in Canada have been silent on this. The Saudis are being bastards. But look, that's who they are. We expect no better from them. But we expect better from our own fellow journalists who are silent. We expect better from the foreign minister who's silent. We expect better from the Prime Minister's office that's pretending there's no problem here. But thank God for Jason Kenney. He's not the foreign minister or the natural resources minister, but he knows about human rights and he speaks up against charlatans like Amnesty International. This is not his file, but he was asked about this by Alex Mihailovich of The Sun today, and he let her rip. Look at this video.
Canada is a country that is a champion of freedom of speech. That is a constitutional right, and we don't take kindly to foreign governments threatening directly or indirectly Canadian broadcasters or media for giving voice to freedom of speech. We think that's inappropriate and certainly inconsistent with Canada's belief in freedom of speech.
Jason Kenney, in response to The Sun, called out the Saudis. You know what? On my way into the studio, I'm going to take a break from my planned presentation. On my way into the studio, I got an email from another brave cabinet minister, and I'm going to read it from my BlackBerry. I'm sorry I haven't had time to put it in the computer for you to see on the screen. This is from Rana Ambrose, the Minister for the Status of Women. I'm just going to read it to you because it's so awesome, and then I'll get back to my presentation. As Minister for Status of Women, I support those who shed light on the abuse of women's basic rights and freedoms around the world. And then she goes for the close. We in Canada should never take these freedoms for granted and should always remember those women in other countries, such as Saudi Arabia, who continue to be denied the most basic of rights, the right to vote or even being allowed to drive. I applaud the efforts of any Canadian individual or organization, such as ethicaloil.org, working to raise awareness about women's oppression in any corner of the world. We will only achieve equality for women if we face those challenges head on, no matter who we offend. Signed, the Honorable Rana Ambrose. I just got that right now. You know what? Rana Ambrose is awesome. Jason Kenney is awesome. But I'm sorry that our Prime Minister and our Foreign Affairs Minister are AWOL. I want you to go to your computer and I want you to write an email to the Prime Minister right now. pm@pm.gc.ca. You tell the Prime Minister that it's his job to get tough with the Saudis. It's not the Minister for Women. It's not the Minister for Immigration. It's the Prime Minister's job. It's the Foreign Minister's job. The CTV ban on this human rights ad continues today. The bullies at the Saudi law firm are continuing their threats today. Nothing has changed other than now we know that when the chips are down, you can count the true friends of freedom in this government on one hand. Hell, on two fingers.